All right, second part. So we're gonna now put the lining on the pieces that we cut, and then we're gonna put the pieces together. So that's the first thing you've got to do is glue these pieces of board out and put them on your decorative paper. So that's what we're going to do. And this is pretty simple. You don't even need like newsprint or anything because we're just going to glue directly to the board and then lay the board down. And then in the end, we're just going to put something on top of it, heavy. You can use books. If you have a board and a brick, that's what I'm going to use because that's what I have for my drying stations. But if you just have something heavy, just hold it down while it dries. And you will need to wait. So I'll pause the recording, let this dry, and come back and put it together. So you should probably wait, you know, at least half an hour. More like an hour or two is probably better. But if you want to try to do it in a day, maybe do this, go eat lunch, come back and do it. Okay. So, you know, you figure that out, what you want to do for that. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're just going to glue up the board. So here's my glue. And I'm using maybe a little bit larger brush than I normally do for stuff because I actually want to be able to just kind of quickly, glue's getting dry, sticky. Just glue this up completely. So I'm just holding one end and brushing it on, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do is just rotate it around and then finish gluing the other end like that. I need to add some methyl cellulose to this glue because it's sticky. It works, it's fine, but that's a little thicker than I like the glue to be, but that's perfectly fine. And then I'll set my glue brush down. I have a pencil there to keep it from touching the surface. So I'm just using that like a little edge. And so then I'm going to put the glue side. You can see my decorative paper is facing down. So the decoration side is away. And now I'm going to put this down. And I'm going to take a bone folder just real quick and go across the back, but I'm going to do it on the other side in a few minutes after I've glued everything down. So I'm just real quick, give it a rub just to get even pressure across, but I'm going to flip it over and do that on the decorate side in a little bit. So then I'm going to glue this other piece. Just glue this out. And then rotate it and finish gluing it. And then my spine is going to go right here. Okay. Just make sure there's glue everywhere. And then glue this down. And they don't have to be even or anything because we're going to be cutting them out right up against the board. So we'll be taking our X-Acto and just going right up against that. So this doesn't matter. They're all going to be loose pieces again. So I am going to go ahead and just put mine on there like that. Sometimes I just get obsessive and it's like, oh, line it up, but you don't have to do that. Okay, and then the last piece. And then I am going to show you how to make sure you bone fold it on the other side because it can get especially if your paper's thin like this one, it can ripple and you don't want that. I mean, you're not going to be able to see this real well on the outside of the box. You'd have to really look in there, but you don't want it like just not laying flat. So once you get them down, so I'm going to just take my ruler and tear this excess piece off. Whoops, because it's already torn. It didn't want to tear there. It wanted to tear higher. No big deal. Okay, so I'm just taking that off so it's not so much paper flopping around. So now I'm going to flip this over, and you can see, I can actually see like where it's popping off, and just bone fold it down. This paper used to be really dirty, like it had a lot of excess paste on it, but I think I sprayed it so it's not so bad. But I'm checking my blood. That's why I keep doing that. I didn't want it to get all over, because it can get, I can feel it, but I think I've spray fixed it so it's not so messy. So I'm just, it's hard to see. Like I had to feel that with my fingers that it was ripply. Oh, there you can see it. If I can hold it up to the raking light. No, I don't think you guys are going to be able to see what I can see, but there are ripples where it's wet with glue and it's wanting to come up. So I'm just trying to make sure that all of that air is out. And like I said, it's not something you're going to be able to see probably, but you know, you never know. It could interfere with putting your books in there. It could be sticking out so far that it's just not, you know, it's kind of holding the book back. So just make sure you get it down. Okay, take that time to do that. Okay, so then you're going to let this dry. So I'm going to grab a board. This to put on top, and either a brick, or actually I'm just going to close my glue and set my glue on top of that. And that's going to be my drying. So I'm going to pause the video, let that dry for probably 20-30 minutes, and then I will come back and cut it out and put the pieces together. Okay, so I'm just going to pause the recording. This is going to stay one recording. Okay. All right, we're back, I think. Yeah, we're back. All right, so now we're going to cut these pieces out and glue them together. So I'm going to take them out from under weight and I'll just set my board to the side and get my X-Acto. And now I'm literally just going to run my X-Acto right up against the board edge all the way around. Just one at a time, cut them. Try to make sure you cut flush against the board because it's easy to kind of pull away at the edge there. Just kind of pull straight down. And then you're just going to go all the way around each board. So there's really no big secret about that. And however you do it, it's fine. If you start getting to where you can just pop it out, just go ahead and do that and set it to the side. And then just keep cutting. There you go. And then we're going to put it together. I'm going to show you how to do that part. If it tears a little bit, maybe that wasn't completely dry. That's not that big a deal. I can always put it in the back if it really tore, but it's just barely a little tear there. This is why you need to let it dry. I probably didn't let it dry as long as you guys need to, just because I wanted to go ahead and do the video, but I at least did 10 or 15 minutes, but it's still sort of cool. I touch it to my lips to see if it's still cool, and it is a little bit. So you really want it to feel like room temperature. Oh, my dog might get into this in a second. I can hear her growling because the yard guys are out there. Okay. All right. Hold on. Yes. Okay. Done. So now that's all trash. So now here's all my pieces. So remember, this is something that people tend to do accidentally, and that is to glue it so that the things are facing out because it's so pretty. This is the inside of the box, okay? So don't forget that as you're doing it. And if you follow this, you should be okay. Um, if you follow me putting this together, you should be all right. Okay. So now we're going to use the glue again. And I don't use a brush for this. I use my fingers. So what I'm going to do is, this is the spine. These are the top and the bottom. And I'm going to glue the spine on. It goes between these two boards like so. Like it would be laying flat and these go against it. So it's a little bit tricky to do. I'm going to be gluing this small piece to the edge of this board. Like it's going to sit on top of that board like that. So that the piece is flush. You're going to be able to see the edge of this, the bigger board. Okay, so I'm going to put glue on the edge. So again, they're going to face that decorative part is going to face inward. So I'm going to put some glue on the edge here. So I just dab a little, like touch my fingertip into the glue, and then I just run my finger down the edge like that. And now this little sticky, little bit of stickiness in the glue is great because it's good for putting a box together. You kind of want sticky glue like that. And then usually I'll have like a towel or a paper towel or something to wipe my fingers, but because I don't have that sitting here right now and I'm not going to stop it again, I'm just going to kind of roll it off of my fingers. Okay, so now I'm going to hold the board up like this, it's up against the tabletop, and I'm going to push this board into it. And so now what I need to do is just kind of sit here and hold it. There's really no other way to do this. I mean, I know that professional box makers have all of these systems and different things that they use to let things dry, but we don't have that. So we're going to just do it like this. So I usually try to hold it for at least a minute. And I know that's like, whoa, but what's a minute? It's not that long. So you're going to do that. And then I like to okay, because it's kind of sticking. So I'm going to move it, kind of wipe that off. And sometimes if I really feel like it's too wet and it's just being a mess, I'll get something with square edges and I'll push. I probably shouldn't use the box that I already made to do this, but something with a square edge or, oh, what's the best is the board. This board that I had. So if you have something like this is great to help because then you have something square to push against. So something like that is wonderful and it really helps a lot. So now I'm going to go ahead. I mean, also got to line it up head and tail as well. And make sure these edges are flush. So, don't let it get too dry before you make that adjustment if you need to. So then I'm going to go ahead and do the other one. And this time, okay, so this one's going to get glued against the edge. So I can just kind of push it up against. And I think what I'm going to do is just so I don't have to pick this piece up, I'm going to go ahead and put my glue on top, but on the edge, right on top of that board. So that's not going on the edge of the board. It's actually going on top of the decorative paper because that's where it's going to end up being. And if you don't like using your finger, of course you can use a brush. I just feel like I can control it a lot better if I do it like this. So this is why I do it this way. So there's that little bead of glue and it's not on the edge of the board. It's sitting on top of the decorated paper. And now I'm going to take this and push it against the spine piece. This one seems a little bit shorter, so I'm kind of trying to center it on there and hope, it all balances out. It's just like a little bit a hair short. And I can see there's glue in there. And so sometimes I'll take a little scrap of board and wipe that out because it's like that's kind of a lot. So I might take my little scrap that I had and just kind of go in. You kind of can't see what I'm doing, but I'm just dragging it in there. I'm just wiping off a little bit of that glue because it got a little messy back there. And if I really don't like it, I can go in and just wipe it because it kind of was too much. I think I laid on a little bit too much glue. But this is going to dry clear. It's in the back of the book, I mean the back of the box. And so I'm not going to worry about it too much. So this is hard to do on a video because really we need to let this dry. And we are going to let it dry. I'm going to make a separate video for the covering. But even from step to step, it would be better. And I rotated that, okay? Because I feel like I need to get this square on this side as well. And that this side that I did first is more dry. Okay, so I do want to make sure that it's staying glued though. So pushing, but I'm pushing. It looks like I'm pushing, but I'm actually pulling these apart and pushing right at the spine piece. Like that. Okay, so I'm going to scoot this a little bit just to make sure it's not sticking to my mat. I don't think I need that anymore, so I can move the board. I'm just double checking here because sort of curving out. So what happens is when we glue to one side of a board, the board itself is going to curl towards that glued surface. So that's why when we cover it, that's why we line it, is because then it'll be glued on both sides. So we have glued in the lining, and now when we put the book cloth on, we'll have that gluey substrate on the other side, and that's going to balance out the curve of the board. So if you're noticing like a little bit of curving, that's what that is. It's the dried paper is actually pulling just slightly the board towards it because that's where the glue was. And then it starts to dry and it shrinks. So, because it stretches when it gets glued out and then it shrinks back when it dries. Okay, so now I'm going to set this up. And this is still wet. So if you are doing this and you can pause the video and go do something else for a little while, for even 5 minutes, let this dry better. You're going to get better results. So I would suggest doing that. I'm going to go ahead and just push through it and put it together. But my suggestion to you would be to let this dry a little bit more, especially if you've got more glue going on here and you're just feeling weird about it, because you really want to make sure it's this is hard to do. It's flat back here, and you want to make sure that things are even up here on the top. So, make all those adjustments, let it dry for 5 minutes before you do this next step. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to put the lid on. So you can imagine what I'm getting ready to do. I can put glue here. Maybe that's what I'll do is I'll just put it across the top like that. And then I'm going to set my piece, not out, not with the decorated side out, but down like that. And it should fit right there on top, just like a little cap. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. So, this can get messy again. You feel better with a glue brush or like a skinny paintbrush. Oops, I drifted a little bit. A little thinner paintbrush, that's fine to do. I don't know. You want it on there pretty thick because you don't want it, you're not trying to get a thin surface of glue here. You really want to have some glue on there. So that's why I just go ahead and use my finger. And then down the side here. And I'm just kind of, now I'm just kind of tapping my finger on top, dabbing it on there. And there's like a little gap right there, so I'm kind of just filling it in with glue. And then again, I'm going to take my gluey finger and just wipe it in the palm of my hand. Kind of roll that glue around. It's, I'll wash my hands later and it'll come off. Now let me wipe up that little dot that I dripped. Okay. Now I'm going to set this piece on top. And all I'm going to do here is I am trying to make sure this is good. This is working really well today. But I want to make sure that that front, this piece is flush at the front and side to side. So I'm kind of having to, you can imagine if this was a larger slip case, how tricky this can get to try to make sure that the edges are flush here, it's flush here, and then that the board's not curving. That's why it's good to get it out from underweight and do this right away. You don't want it to sit out in the air because when it's underweight, it's restricted and it's not going to curve as much. But as soon as you take it out, it starts to curve. That's why I was showing you guys that little effect that happens, that curving. You can kind of see it right here. It's not perfectly straight down, and it's because of that. It's glued on one side. But it's perfectly fine. Everything's going to be all right because when we glue it up, when we glue up our book cloth and we cover it, it'll be no problem. And I'm just pushing to make sure. And if there's a little bit of an edge, I can just kind of squeeze and make it flush again. Okay. And then I'm going to do the last one. So I can flip that over. And when you get that one on, everything feels a lot more stable when you get that first cap, the head or tail on. So now I'm going to put that glue on here. And now for this last step, I'm going to glue this cap on, and then I am going to let this dry completely before we cover, because that, I'm going to have to come back in a solid 20 minutes to do it. In fact, I might even just do it a little bit later because I've got another thing I got to do. I got to go to a meeting, but sorry. This is, but anyway, I really do want this to be dry. So again, I'm going to wipe my finger off in my palm and then just mush. I know this is real. This is very real. And then I'll just brush my hand off, because that rolled up glue that gets on your fingers, that doesn't affect and doesn't hurt anything. And it comes right off. It's not like wet glue getting smeared. That's a problem. But dried glue like that, that's why I just kind of do that if I don't have a towel handy. So I'll do little things like that. There's that little torn edge, and I'm going to put that towards the back. And in fact, that's even going to be on top of the box anyway, so it really isn't a big deal. And then I'm just going to make sure everything's even. And I am just like, it's hard for you to see what I'm doing, but I'm trying to make sure it's flush here again. It's flush on this edge. And it's almost by feel that I'm doing it. Like if I feel a little edge, I'll kind of pull the other piece flush with it. And then I just kind of work my way back, because I tend to concentrate on that front edge because that's the one that can look kind of funky. And even back here, I can feel like a little funny edge right there. So I just squeezed a little bit. And I'm squeezing down using the weight of my hand to kind of push down on it. And then I kind of hold on to it for a good minute. How I was saying, let it dry for a minute, 60 seconds. That kind of, it'll take, and the glue will hold itself. And then if I feel a little funny place right there, I'll just kind of push, and then I'm pushing it in where it was sticking out, and then I push down to make that get in line and let it dry. But if I really have, and I'll show you this before we cover it, I'll show you how, if you need to sand it just a little bit, and that's another thing, if you're going to do something like that, you got to make very sure that that box is dry before you do something like that, because that'll make a huge mess. It'll break it. If it's not dry and you try to sand something off, like a little weird edge or a little rough edge or something, it will tear up your box. So, and I'm still making little adjustments before I'm done. And I can feel a little place right there that's sort of sticking out. And that's what I'll sand. It's just a barely, it's no big deal. I think things like this are kind of negligible where it's like, do I really want to spend that much time on that? But if it's, if it's sticking out, I can fix it. So I'll show you how to do that before we cover. Okay. So now I think that's ready. It can dry. So I'm going to just let it sit here. And that's that little edge that I don't like, but I feel like it's going to be okay. This is that little edge I was talking about where it's sticking out just a little bit. I could also sand that down just a tiny bit, and I think I probably will. For some reason on this edge in the back, it's doing that just a little bit. And sometimes I'll go back, if I start, I think I'm almost done, I might go back and kind of check this stuff and make sure that things are actually glued. But I'm gonna just sand that off just a tiny bit. But I think we're pretty good. So all of these little edges and stuff are gonna get covered with the book cloth. So you can see, this is I'll take the stuff out of it so you can see. This is the covered box and this is the inside of what's in here. It's exactly the same. Okay, so you can see where we're going. And we're gonna let that dry. I mean, I am gonna let it dry for real this time, not just for 10 minutes like I did earlier. This I need to make sure it's dry. So I'm gonna leave it like this. I'm just gonna leave it sitting like that so that the weight is down on it like this. Sometimes I'll even put a little bit of weight on there. I'm not gonna put the glue, that's too heavy, but I have these little, just something I can set on there. I'm trying to see if that'll work. It doesn't feel good. It feels too wobbly, but something with a little bit of weight, even a little stack of books, or even like this piece of board in this book. That's what I'm going to do. Just to kind of restrict it, just to give it a tiny bit of weight. And I'm just setting that off camera. And I'm going to let that dry for 20 minutes. And then I'll be back and I will show you how to cover and do all the little cutting and little finishing techniques that we have to do it for the slipcase. All right. See you in a little bit. Bye.